Chapter 1: The Abandoned Library. Elias had walked past the old library 100 times in his life. Most people avoided it without thinking. A quiet instinct, like stepping around a patch of rot in the road. The building had been closed for years. Its windows boarded, its doors chained, its stone walls stained with the color of forgotten storms. No one ever spoke about it. No one ever tried to repair it. It simply existed, like a memory the town wished it could erase. But on this particular evening, as the sky dimmed and the wind pressed cold fingers against his coat, Elias felt something he couldn't explain. A pull, a sensation like an invisible thread tightening around his chest, leading him toward the library steps. He paused at the entrance, looking up at the cracked stone archway. A faded sign hung crookedly above the door, the name of the place long worn away. Only the shape of missing letters remained. He shouldn't go inside, that much he knew. But his curiosity whispered louder than his caution. The chain holding the door shut was broken, not freshly snapped, but rusted through as if it had given up resisting years ago. Elias pushed the door open. It creaked like something alive protesting his intrusion. Inside, the air hit him like a wave. Cold, heavy, still. Dust floated in thick layers, stirring only when he stepped further into the darkness. Wooden shelves lined the walls, their frames warped with time, leaning like old pillars struggling to remain upright. Several tables lay overturned, their legs snapped like brittle bones. A ladder had fallen from its rail and rested against a collapsed pile of books, crumbling into powder. But amid all of this decay, something felt wrong. Libraries should smell like paper, like ink, like old stories. But here it smelled like silence, a silence so deep that it seemed to swallow the sound of his breathing. Elias walked between the rows, his footsteps muffled by dust. He expected to find nothing but rot and ruin. Instead, in the farthest corner, where the faint light from the doorway barely reached, he saw a pedestal, a single pedestal, standing tall, unbroken, and resting on it was the book, thick, black, perfectly preserved. Not a speck of dust upon it. It looked as though it had been placed there moments ago, as though someone had prepared it for him specifically. Elias frowned. Something about the book felt aware, as if it was watching him, waiting. He approached slowly, each step heavier than the last. The air seemed to tighten around him, growing colder. When he finally reached the pedestal, he hesitated. His hand hovered above the cover, only a few centimeters away, close enough to feel the chill radiating from it. The leather was smooth, almost too smooth, like skin without imperfections. There was no title, no author's name, no markings at all, just a black silent surface that reflected none of the dim light around it. Elias swallowed hard. His pulse quickened. A whisper brushed the inside of his mind, so soft he nearly missed it. Take it. He wasn't sure if he heard it or if he imagined it, but he reached out anyway. The moment his fingers touched the cover, a shock ran through him. Not painful, but sharp, like plunging his hand into icy water. The book was cold, terribly cold, colder than anything in the room. Elias drew in a shaky breath. He lifted the book from the pedestal, and as he did, the door behind him slammed shut, so violently that dust rained from the ceiling. He spun around, heart pounding, but there was no wind, no draft, nothing that should have moved that door, only silence, a suffocating silence that wrapped around him like a closing fist. And in his hands, the book felt heavier, as if something inside it was awakening. Chapter 2. The Book That Writes Itself. Elias stood frozen in the dim, dust-choked aisle, the heavy book resting in his hands like a cold stone. His breath came slow and uneven as he stared at the shut door, trying to convince himself that the slam had a rational cause. A draft, perhaps, or rotten hinges giving way. But deep down, in the quiet place where instinct whispers truths we refuse to hear, he knew better. The book had reacted. The book had noticed him. A faint tremor ran through its spine, barely perceptible, dash, as if something beneath the leather cover shifted. Elias swallowed hard. He forced himself to look down at it. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he slowly opened the book. The pages were blank, perfectly blank, so clean and pale they almost glowed. In the weak light filtering through the boards on the windows, Elias flipped through page after page, expecting at least a title, an inscription, a date something. But there was nothing, just silence trapped in paper. He closed the book again, his fingers tightening around the cover. That was when he heard it. A whisper, soft, thin, like a breath drawn across the surface of glass. It came from the book. Elias froze. The whisper grew clearer, forming words that felt cold against his skin. Look again. His heart hammered in his chest. He opened the book once more. This time, the pages were not blank. Lines of ink bled across the paper, slowly, like veins spreading under the skin. Letters formed, one by one, shaky and uneven, as though someone wrote from a great distance or through great pain. And the word said, Elias, we have been waiting for you. His breath caught in his throat. He took a step back, wanting to drop the book, but unable to release it. His fingers clung to it involuntarily, as though held there by invisible hooks. The writing pulsed on the page, each word darkening as if absorbing light from the room. Elias's voice trembled. Who are you? The letters reshaped themselves. Ink swirled like black smoke, coiling into new words. Follow, Elias blinked. "Follow what?" he whispered. The book answered. The lines of ink grew, spreading across the paper like roots, until they formed an image, a crude map, a twisting forest path, a clearing, a stone arch he did not recognize. But underneath the map, scrawled in jagged strokes, was a final command: "Come alone." The pages snapped shut on their own. The sound cracked through the library like a gunshot. Elias stumbled backward, his heart beat a frantic drum in his ears. He stared down at the closed book, but it no longer trembled. It no longer whispered. It simply rested in his hands, silent and patient, as if it had told him all it needed to. He looked toward the door, half expecting it to swing open by itself. Instead, a faint breeze, cold, unnatural, moved through the aisles, rustling the crumbling pages of the ruined books around him. It carried a single sound, a soft, distant whisper: Elias. His name, drawn out, almost pleading, almost hungry. Elias backed away slowly, book held tightly against his chest. He needed to leave. He needed to get out before the walls themselves began to whisper. But as he approached the door and wrapped his hand around the handle, the book suddenly warmed. A pulse of heat like a heartbeat. A second voice, low, resonant, and impossibly ancient, rose from within its pages. "If you do not follow, we will come for you." Elias's blood turned to ice. He fled the library, the door slamming shut behind him with a force that shook the frame. Outside, the world felt strangely dim, as though the sun had retreated behind clouds. He couldn't see. Elias pressed the book against his chest, its presence heavy, its warmth unnatural. He looked toward the dark line of the forest in the distance. He knew where the map was leading. He knew he had no choice. The book had chosen him, and whatever waited in the shadows of that forest path was already calling his name. Chapter 3. Into the Forest. The path leading away from the abandoned library felt colder than it should. As Elias stepped into the fading light of evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world around him had shifted ever so slightly, as if colors were duller, shadows longer, and the air thicker with something unseen. He held the book tightly under his arm, its weight an uncomfortable reminder that he was no longer alone, even when there was no one in sight. Elias took a deep breath and began walking toward the forest that loomed at the edge of town. The trees there were dark silhouettes, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The sun had nearly dipped behind the horizon, painting the world in bruised shades of blue and purple. As he approached, the forest seemed to exhale, a long, low sigh that chilled him to the core. The path from the book's map began at a narrow opening between two massive oak trees. He had walked by this place countless times, Yet never once had he noticed this gap, this hidden entrance. It felt like the forest itself had rearranged to welcome him or trap him. The moment he stepped inside, the sounds of the outside world vanished. No wind, no birds, no distant hum of evening life, only silence and the soft crunch of leaves beneath his boots. Elias glanced down at the book. Its cover trembled faintly, as if responding to something deeper in the woods. He whispered under his breath, "What do you want from me?" There was no answer, only the faint throb of warmth pulsing through the leather. The deeper he walked, the stranger the forest became. Trees twisted unnaturally, their trunks bending in ways that defied reason. Roots crawled along the ground, like thick gnarled veins, seeking something just out of reach. The air smelled different too, damp earth, decaying leaves, and beneath it all a faint metallic scent that reminded him of rusted iron or dried blood. He shook the thought from his mind. The path curved sharply, leading him toward a place where the trees leaned inward, forming a natural archway. Elias stopped. He squinted through the dim light. There, just barely visible, were markings on the trunks, symbols carved deeply into the bark, circles, triangles, jagged lines that twisted into one another, like a language not meant for human eyes. He reached out to touch one, but the moment his fingers brushed the bark, his vision blurred. For a single heartbeat, he saw something else. A flash of the forest, as it might have been long ago. People standing in a ring, hooded figures chanting in low voices, a book held high above their heads, the same book he carried now. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Elias stumbled backward, gasping. He pressed a shaking hand to his forehead. "No," he whispered. "No, that wasn't real." But the forest felt heavier now, as if aware of his intrusion. He continued walking, though every instinct screamed at him to turn back. The path grew narrower. Thorns brushed against his coat. Branches creaked above him, their movements strangely deliberate, as though something watched him from just beyond the reach of the fading light. At last, after what felt like an eternity, Elias stepped into a small clearing. In the center stood a massive stone archway. He had seen it in the map the book showed him, but the map had not captured its size, its presence, its unnatural perfection. The arch towered above him, carved from dark stone, that seemed to swallow the dim light around it. Strange runes lined its surface, glowing faintly with a cold blue hue, the same color he had seen flash inside the library. The ground beneath the arch was worn smooth, as if countless footsteps had passed through this place. Elias approached slowly, his breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. He reached out to touch the stone, but before his fingers made contact, the book in his arm vibrated violently. A whisper rose from deep within its pages, soft, urgent, unmistakably real. Enter. Elias's heart pounded. His legs trembled. He swallowed hard, looked up at the archway, and stepped beneath it. The moment he did, the forest behind him disappeared. The world around him shifted, and nothing was the same.
Chapter 4. The Gate Between Worlds. For a long moment, Elias couldn't breathe, not because the air was gone, but because it felt different. Thicker, colder, heavy, as if saturated with something ancient. He turned around, expecting to see the forest behind him, the crooked trees, the twisted path, the dying evening light. But there was nothing. Only darkness stretching outward, like an endless void. The archway still stood behind him, but the world it once connected to had vanished. Elias took one trembling step back toward it, reaching out a hand. His fingertips brushed the stone, and the surface rippled, like water disturbed by a falling leaf. He jerked his hand away. Number. There was no going back. Not now. Not ever. A cold wind drifted across the ground, carrying faint whispers that echoed, as though spoken by voices far beneath the earth. He clutched the book tighter. Its pulse beat steadily, warmth radiating through the leather like a living thing. Elias finally dared to look ahead. The world before him was a narrow valley, surrounded by jagged cliffs that stretched up so high. They vanished into thick, swirling mist. Black trees dotted the landscape, not like the ones back home, but tall and slender, their branches moving subtly, as if sensing his presence. The sky above was neither day nor night. A dim twilight hung over everything, lit by no visible sun or moon, a colorless glow that gave shape to the world without ever truly illuminating it. Elias whispered to himself, "What is this place?" As if in response, the book warmed in his hands, and the cover fluttered open. He tried to close it, but the pages turned on their own, flipping rapidly, until they settled on a single page, filled with ink that swirled like smoke. 3 words formed slowly. The other side. Elias's throat tightened. The other side of what? The ink writhed, as if the book were considering him before reshaping into new letters. The veil! Before he could ask more, a soft glow caught his attention. The runes on the archway behind him, once faint dash, now blazed with cold blue fire. They pulsed, beating like a second heartbeat, beside the one coming from the book. Elias stepped back instinctively. The ground beneath the archway shook. Light spilled upward in thin streams, curling into the air like smoke rising in reverse. The arch was closing, sealing itself, removing all trace of the path he had taken. Elias felt panic grip him. "Wait, no! I didn't mean—" A deafening crack split the silence as the runes blazed a final bright white flash, and then went dark. Completely dark. The archway turned gray, dull, lifeless. A dead monument in a dead land. Elias's breath came fast. As he stared at the sealed doorway, he was trapped, not in a metaphorical sense, but literally, standing in a place beyond anything human. A place where the rules of the world were twisted, frayed, broken. The whispering wind died. A deeper silence settled, one that pressed against his eardrums like pressure underwater. Then, from somewhere far ahead, a sound, soft, barely audible, a distant, rhythmic thudding. Footsteps, slow, heavy, uneven, coming closer. Elias's pulse spiked. He looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to hide. Only the narrow path ahead, and the sheer cliffs rising on either side. The footsteps. Chapter 5. The village, without people. A shadow spilled across the stone path long before its owner appeared. It stretched toward Elias like a grasping hand, fingers elongated by the pale, directionless light. That illuminated this strange place. The footsteps grew louder, dragging, uneven, as if whatever approached was forcing its legs to move, against their will. Elias pressed himself flatter against the cliff wall, clutching the book so tightly, his knuckles turned white. The figure emerged from the mist. At first, Elias thought it was a man, a tall, thin silhouette, draped in tattered cloth, that hung from its limbs like dying skin. But as it moved closer, he saw its head tilt unnaturally, as if the spine inside the neck had been bent in too many places. Its arms dangled too low, its fingers scraping against the stone, with a soft, grating sound. It wasn't alive, at least not in a way Elias understood. He held his breath, hoping the creature would pass him by. It didn't. It stopped. Right in front of him. The creature's head twitched, as it slowly lifted its face toward him. What looked back at Elias was not human. Its eyes were empty sockets, deep holes filled with swirling black smoke. Its jaw hung open, but no sound came out. Only the smoke escaping in thin tendrils. That curled upward like dying whispers. And then the book Elias held, burned hot in his hands. The creature suddenly recoiled, shrinking back, as if the sight of the book pained it. It backed away violently, scraping its hands across the stone, until it turned, and limped rapidly into the mist, vanishing without a sound. Elias stood frozen, his breath trapped in his chest. When he finally dared to look down, the book had cooled again, silent, still. Watching, he swallowed hard and forced his feet to move. The path opened into a wider valley ahead and in the distance. He saw something he didn't expect. Houses, small ones, wooden, with chimneys, lantern hooks, front steps, a village. But there was no smoke, no voices, no movement. As he approached, the silence deepened. Not emptiness, but absence. A wrongness so thick. It felt like wading through water. The first house Elias reached had its door half open, creaking softly in the faint wind. He pushed it aside and stepped inside. The interior was lit by a single lantern, sitting on a table. The flame flickered weakly, as if struggling to remain alive. A bowl of soup sat on the table, still warm, steam barely rising from its surface. A chair lay tipped on its side, as though someone had just stood up, suddenly, violently, and never returned. Elias's pulse raced. He moved deeper inside. Every corner, every shadow felt charged with a presence, just out of sight. When he glanced toward the cradle by the wall, he felt his stomach twist. It was rocking, slowly, gently, rocking itself. Elias took a step back. He whispered into the silence, "Hello? Anyone here?" The house seemed to breathe. Floorboards creaked. Wind moved through unseen cracks, but no one answered. He left quickly, pushing the door shut behind him, as if to keep something inside. The next house was the same. A meal half-eaten. Water still warm in the wash basin, a fire burning low in the hearth. But no people. Just traces of life, abandoned mid-motion. Elias stepped back into the center of the village. The silence felt heavy, pressing down from all sides. The book pulsed once, a faint thud like a heartbeat. Elias whispered, "What happened here?" A gust of wind swept through the street, and with it, dash, a whisper, not from a direction, not from a mouth, but everywhere at once, soft, layered, deeply wrong. "They fed us." Elias froze. The book grew warm, almost eager. Another whisper followed, rising like a breath from beneath the earth. "And we fed on them." Elias backed away slowly, his heart hammered against his ribs. Something terrible had happened here, something the book wanted him to understand, something it wanted him to repeat. And then, from the far end of the village, a lantern flickered, as if someone had just walked past. Elias turned toward it as the shadows shifted. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. Chapter 6. Whispers in the Empty Houses.
Chapter 9. The Keeper's Truth. Elias fled through the deserted village, boots pounding against the dirt, the cold, breathless air burning in his lungs. Behind him, the ink creature shrieked, a strangled, twisting noise, like metal twisting under immense pressure. Its tendrils scraped across the ground, pulling its shifting form after him. The keeper, the hooded woman, kept pace surprisingly well. Her staff glowed with pale blue light, each strike of its end against the earth, sending small shock waves rippling outward to slow the creature's advance. But for every step they gained, the ink thing gained another. It was learning, adapting, becoming aware of its own strength. Elias stumbled around a broken cart, his breath ragged. "Where are we going?" he shouted. "Somewhere it cannot follow," the keeper said through clenched teeth. She led him up a winding path. Behind the last row of houses, roots twisted underfoot. The world seemed to warp subtly, as though the landscape itself resisted their passage. The creature shrieked again. The sound tore through Elias's mind, making him drop to his knees. The keeper slammed her staff into the ground. A pulse of blue light burst outward, forming a thin barrier behind them. The ink creature slammed into it, splattering across the shimmering surface, before pulling itself back together. The barrier flickered, thin, unstable. As the creature hammered into it again, Elias gasped, "Is that going to hold?" "No," the keeper said bluntly, "but it will slow it." They pressed on. After several agonizing minutes, the path leveled out into a clearing Elias had not seen before. A ring of ancient stones encircled the area, half buried in blackened soil. Symbols were carved into each stone, the same harsh shapes he'd seen on the trees, on the archway, on the altar. At the center of the circle stood a stone well. Its mouth was wide and dark, rimmed with claw-like rocks that angled inward, as if trying to keep something inside. A faint mist rose from the well, cold and shimmering. Elias shuddered. He didn't want to look at it, but couldn't look away. The keeper stopped at the edge and placed her palm gently on the stone. "It's awake," she whispered. "It senses what you carry." Elias wrapped his arms around himself. "My God, what is this place?" The keeper turned toward him, her expression grim. "This is the Well of Binding, the last place where the book was imprisoned." Elias blinked. "Imprisoned? You mean someone trapped it here?" "Long ago," she said, "before this village was built, before your world and mine drifted apart." She paused, her eyes distant. We didn't always live separately. There was a time when the veil between worlds was thinner, when knowledge and power flowed freely. She ran her fingers along the stone. But with power came greed, and with greed came the birth of the book. Elias felt his stomach twist. You're saying the book wasn't created? The keeper shook her head slowly. No, it was born from the worst of us, from the hunger for secrets, for control, for immortality. She turned her gaze toward the swirling mist in the well. It began as a fragment, a thought made solid. Her voice dropped. But thoughts can grow. Elias stepped back from the well. And the village? What happened to them? The keeper's voice broke. They tried to contain it. They carved runes, built altars, sacrificed weeks of their lives to starve it. Her hands trembled slightly. But the book fights back. Always. It whispers to the weakest hearts, promises, power. She nodded toward the empty houses. Someone here listened. Elias felt cold all over. So they fed it, the villagers? Yes, she whispered. They fed themselves to it, mind, body, and soul, until nothing remained. She turned sharply toward Elias. And now it wants you. Elias stepped back again. The idea gripped him with a horror deeper than anything he'd felt before. Why me? He whispered. The keeper studied him for a long moment. Because you opened it. That can't be the only reason, she interrupted sharply. The book opens for everyone, but it only speaks to those it chooses. Elias froze. And why did it speak to me? The keeper hesitated. Then she said quietly, because something inside you is already hungry. A chill ran down Elias's spine. Before he could respond, a deafening crack split the air behind them. The barrier had shattered. Ink spilled between the trees, like a tide of living darkness, crawling across the ground, rising upward into a towering shape. The keeper raised her staff, her voice sharpened with urgency. There is no more time. You must decide. Help me destroy it. The ground shook violently. Ink tendrils whipped through the air. Or let it claim you. Chapter 10. The Ritual Stone. The trees surrounding the clearing erupted with motion as the ink creature surged forward, a shadowed tide dragging itself across the ground. With terrible speed, its tendrils spread in every direction, climbing the stones, curling around the broken huts, reaching for the keeper and Elias. Like 100 starving hands, the well at the center of the clearing shuddered violently, as if something inside it was stirring, awakening. The keeper thrust her staff into Elias's hands with such force he almost dropped it. Take this, she commanded. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. Elias blinked. What? Why me? Because it knows me, she said. It hungers for me. She paused, her gaze darkening. But you are new. It has not learned you yet. The ground split open at the tree line as a massive tendril whipped upward, splintering a trunk in two. The creature roared, a soundless, crushing force that rattled through Elias's bones. The keeper raised her hands. Symbols flared across the ground, glowing with the same cold blue light as her staff. They formed a circle around the well, pulsing like a heartbeat. This ritual stone, she said, gesturing toward the well, was once used to contain the book, to bind it beneath the veil. She looked at Elias, her face grave. We must activate it again. Elias shook his head. I don't know how. You don't need to, she said. The stuff remembers. Before he could ask what that meant, the ink creature lunged. Its entire mass surged forward in a wave, tendrils thrashing, eyes forming and dissolving within the darkness. The keeper slammed her palms together. The runes on the ground blazed. A dome of blue fire erupted, slamming downward over the clearing. Like a falling sky, the ink thing collided with it, sending ripples of distortion through the shimmering barrier. For a moment, just a moment, it held. The keeper staggered, sweat dripping down her brow. The light from the runes dimmed with every push. Elias stood frozen, the staff trembling in his hands. He felt the faint hum of energy within it, like a sleeping animal, waiting to be awakened. The keeper's voice cut through the chaos. Elias, listen to me. The book cannot be destroyed, but it can be contained. She pointed toward the well. The stone remembers its prison. You must bring the staff to the edge and call its name. Elias swallowed. What name? She hesitated. And that was all it took. A tendril shot through the barrier, piercing her shoulder. She cried out, falling to her knees, as ink spread through her cloak, like spilled poison. Elias rushed to her, but she held up a shaking hand. Go, she said, her voice strained through clenched teeth. Say the name it whispered to you. The name you saw in the pages. Elias froze. The name? Images flooded his mind. Letters twisting in impossible ways. Patterns forming shapes that hurt to look at. A word written in a language that wasn't a language. A shape more than a sound. He whispered it, but no voice came. His throat burned. His tongue refused to move. The keeper coughed, dark ink spilling from the corner of her mouth. It won't let you say it, she gasped. It fears the well. It knows what will happen if you speak its true name. The creature outside the barrier roared again, striking harder, the dome flickering dangerously with every impact. The keeper grabbed Elias by the collar, dragging him close. Listen to me, she hissed, her voice trembling with desperation. Its name isn't spoken with the mouth. Her eyes bore into his. It is spoken with the mind. The staff hummed violently in his hands, as if hearing the truth. "Feel it," she whispered. "Remember the shape of it." Elias closed his eyes. He felt the ink creature pressing against the shield. He felt its hunger, a vast, endless abyss, trying to drag him inside. But beneath that, beneath the terror, was a pattern, a structure, a shape. He held it in his mind, not a word, but a twisting mark that curled in on itself, like a serpent swallowing its own tail. The stuff responded instantly. A blinding burst of blue fire shot down its length, racing into the stone circle. The runes ignited. The well trembled violently. The ink creature shrieked, pulling back as if burned. "That's it," the keeper gasped. "Now, push it into the well." "How?" Elias shouted. Her eyes met his again. "Want it gone." Her voice cracked. "More than it wants you." Elias turned toward the well. The ink creature surged forward. The barrier shattered. Tendrils shot toward him, and Elias ran straight for the edge of the well. As he reached it, he forced the shape of the name into the staff. With every ounce of will he had, the stuff blazed like a star. A deep, ancient sound rose from the well. A roar, a gasp, a sucking pull, as the ritual awakened fully. The creature screamed, ink tearing from its body. As it was dragged forward, pulled toward the vortex opening. In the center of the well, Elias held on tightly, as the entire world seemed to tilt. The keeper cried out behind him, a warning, a plea, or perhaps a final command. The ink creature began to collapse, pieces of its mass ripping away, as if the well were tearing its reality apart. Elias screamed as the pull grew stronger. The well was not only taking the creature, it was taking everything, including him. Chapter 7. The Keeper of the Village. The shadow hand of ink reached outward, its long twisting tendrils writhing through the air, like smoke given weight. It stretched toward Elias, toward the hooded figure, toward the empty homes that once held life. The ground trembled beneath Elias's feet. The lanterns around the village guttered and died, one after another, as if suffocated by an unseen force. Elias stumbled backward. The ink hand lunged closer, but the hooded figure stepped between them. With one sweeping motion of its arm, it carved a symbol into the air. A glowing mark, pale blue, sharp-edged, burning like cold fire. The ink recoiled instantly, shrieking in a voice that didn't sound like sound at all, more like a sudden implosion inside Elias's skull. The hooded figure stood firm. The symbol it had drawn pulsed once, sending a ripple through the air that shattered the ink hand into black mist. The pages of the book snapped shut with a violent bang, and it fell to the ground at Elias's feet, heaving like a living creature, struggling to breathe. The hooded figure turned toward Elias, and for the first time he saw its face. Not fully, but enough. eyes pale as moonlight, etched with age and exhaustion, skin cracked like old parchment, a long scar cutting down one cheek like a river dried long ago. A woman's voice emerged, soft, layered, trembling with power she barely controlled. You should not be here. Elias's throat tightened. You saw that, didn't you? The book. I saw everything, she replied. And I have seen far worse. She walked toward the fallen book. Her steps were slow, weighted with memories of things no one should remember. Elias followed her gaze to the houses around them, empty, silent, frozen in time. What happened to the people here? He asked, barely able to form the words. The woman closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice cracked under the weight of grief. They trusted the wrong thing. She knelt beside the book, but didn't touch it. Instead, she drew another glowing symbol above it, this one pulsing faintly as if containing the creature within. They believed the book could save them, she continued. They believed it would bring knowledge, power, protection. Her voice darkened. It brought hunger. Elias felt a shiver crawl up his spine. The woman looked at him sharply. You carry it now, but you do not understand what it is. Then tell me, Elias whispered. Please, I need to know. She hesitated. For a moment, it seemed she might refuse. Then she sighed, and the sound echoed through the empty village, like a final breath. Very well. If you wish to understand, walk with me. She rose and turned toward the far end of the village. Her movement stirred no dust, no debris. She walked as though she belonged to this place, and yet was no longer truly part of it. Elias followed her, glancing back at the book still trembling on the ground. It quivered once, as if sensing his departure but the glowing symbol above it held it pinned in place. They passed a row of houses, each one frozen in a moment of interrupted life. A table set for dinner, a blanket half folded, a candle melted sideways as though the world had tilted right before the flame died. Elias swallowed hard. What killed them? The woman didn't turn. Nothing killed them. Her voice was barely audible. They were taken. Elias stopped walking. Taken by the book? She nodded slowly. The book was not born of this world. It is a door, a hungry one. It devours thought, memory, spirit, until there is nothing left but shadows. She turned to face him. This village tried to bind it, to starve it, to bury it. Her eyes hardened. They failed. Elias felt the weight of her words sink deep. And me? Why did it choose me? The woman stepped closer, studying his face. Because you listened when it whispered. She placed a hand on his chest, and he felt a jolt, a spark of cold energy. You have a mind it can shape, a will it can bend, a hunger it can fill. Elias shook his head. That's not true. I don't want anything from it. The woman stepped back, her expression unreadable. Everyone who touches the book wants something, whether they admit it or not. Wind swept through the village again. The houses groaned. The shadows shifted. The woman raised her staff, pointing toward a stone structure at the end of the street, a towering altar covered in dried black stains that neither time nor rain had washed away. There, she said, your answer waits. Elias stared at the altar, a cold dread spreading through him. What answer? The woman met his eyes. The truth of the book and the price it demands. Chapter 8. The Thing Beneath the Pages. The altar loomed ahead like the broken tooth of some ancient beast, its dark surface blotched with stains so old they had fused into the stone itself. Elias approached slowly, each step crunching on shards of bone and brittle fragments of wood that lay scattered around its base. The woman stopped a few paces behind him. She did not step closer, as if something about the altar kept even her at a distance. Elias swallowed hard. What is this place? Her voice drifted toward him, soft but unwavering. This is where they tried to stop it. Elias shivered. Stop what? The woman hesitated, and for a moment, the pale fire in her eyes dimmed. There is no name for what lives inside that book. No word in our language or yours. She stepped to the side, letting him see the full altar. In the center, carved deeply into the stone, was a symbol --, a circle with jagged lines erupting from it, like the cracks from an impact. Elias traced it with his eyes. I've seen this in the library, on the trees, on the archway. She nodded. It is the mark of the sealed. A warning. He frowned. A warning of what? Her gaze shifted to the book he carried, of the thing waiting beneath its pages. The wind stirred again, a cold, sharp gust that carried whispers through the village, as if the shadows had begun to speak. Elias felt the book grow warmer. The warmth spread up his wrist, curling around his arm. Like a tightening coil, he stepped closer to the altar, unable to stop himself. The woman extended her staff and struck the ground. A pale blue shockwave burst outward, pushing back the strange warmth, spreading through Elias's body. He gasped, staggering. She spoke firmly now, her voice layered with a power older than her frail appearance. Listen to me. The book does not contain knowledge. It contains hunger. It does not show you truth. It shows you weakness. And once you begin to read it, it learns what you fear. Elias clutched his arm, still feeling the ghost of the book's touch. But why me? Why did it choose me? The woman closed her eyes. Because you opened it. He stared at her, shocked. That's it? Just because I touched it? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Books choose readers, Elias. But this one chooses meals. Before he could respond, the book trembled violently in his hand. Its leather cover rippled, as if thousands of something legs, claws, tendrils, scratched beneath it. The woman stepped back, raising her staff defensively. The book snapped open. Pages flared outward, turning rapidly faster and faster, until they blurred into a frantic storm. Ink exploded from the center, a thick dark cloud that twisted into shapes not meant to exist. The ink formed, a cluster of eyes, opening all at once, each pupil swirling like a tiny vortex. A mouth without lips lined with jagged symbols. Instead of teeth, the outlines of limbs, too many bending the wrong way. Elias stumbled back, horror rising in his throat. The woman shouted something in a language he couldn't begin to understand. Her staff blazed with blue fire, sending arcs of energy toward the creature. But the ink thing only laughed, a soundless, crushing laughter that reverberated inside Elias's skull. The book's pages continued to writhe, and the creature grew taller, taking shape, as if pulling itself out of the book's reality into this one. The woman thrust her staff forward. A blast of shimmering light struck the ink creature directly. It shrieked, folding inward, ink splattering across the altar like shattered shadows. But as soon as the light faded, the ink crawled back together, reforming. The woman cursed under her breath. It is too strong. Elias watched in terror as the creature began to spread across the ground, tendrils, searching, seeking him. The woman grabbed his shoulder sharply. Listen to me, Elias. Her voice trembled with fear, not for herself, but for him. This is only a fragment of what lies beneath the pages. She pointed toward the ink thing as it dragged itself closer. This is the smallest part of it. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. The smallest? She nodded. If it escapes fully, this world will not survive. The ink creature lunged. The altar cracked beneath its weight. Elias backed away, but the ground beneath him suddenly split open, as if something beneath the soil had begun to awaken. The woman raised her staff once more. Her eyes glowed brighter than before, swirling with desperate, ancient power. Run, she shouted. Run now. And as Elias turned to flee, the ink thing screamed, a sound that tore reality at its edges. As it reached for him, from the pages of the living book, chapter 11, The Last Choice. Elias felt himself sliding toward the abyss, the pull of the awakened well, like a colossal heartbeat beneath the earth. Steady, ancient, merciless. The ground beneath his boots, cracked stones lifting as if gravity were being rewritten. Wind whipped in furious spirals, tearing leaves from phantom trees that weren't even visible anymore. The ink creature screeched, its formless mass unraveling as the vortex dragged it in. Tendrils of darkness snapped like torn fabric, melting into streaks of shadow as they were devoured by the whirl. The keeper staggered forward, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Her cloak tore in the violent wind, strands of cloth pulled toward the widening hole. "Hold on, Elias," she shouted, her voice cracking beneath the roar. He slammed his boots into the ground, trying to anchor himself, but the force pulling him forward was stronger than anything he'd ever felt. The staff blazed in his hands, too bright to look at directly. Its light grew hotter, heavier, as if the entire weight of the ritual was being channeled through him alone. He shouted over the storm, I can't hold it." "Yes, you can." The keeper's voice was fierce, desperate. "You must. You're the one it chose. Use that against it." Elias gritted his teeth. His arm trembled as he forced the staff forward, pushing its tip closer to the well's core. The ink creature lunged desperately, trying to drag itself away from the vortex. Its body deformed, splintering into eyes and mouths that screamed in unison. It was afraid. For the first time, it was afraid. Elias felt that fear burrow into his own mind. Images clawed at him. Visions of power, immortality, knowledge beyond the edges of thought. Promises whispered in 100 voices. You could command worlds. You could reshape reality. You could become more than human. Just let us in. Elias clamped his eyes shut. No. His voice tore from his throat, raw, shaking. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more seductive. The ground trembled. The vortex widened again. The keeper slid several feet toward the well, barely catching herself on one of the ancient stones. "Elias," she cried out, "if you lose control now, it will not swallow just the creature, it will swallow you." Elias felt his grip weakening. His arms burned with exhaustion. The staff grew hotter, pulsing like molten metal. A tendril of ink whipped through the air and wrapped around his ankle. He screamed as it yanked him forward. The keeper lunged, grabbing his other arm with both hands. Her boots dug into the earth. Her muscles strained, every fiber of her body shaking. The ink tightened. Elias felt its cold seep into his skin, into his veins, into his thoughts. "Let go," the voices whispered. "Let go, and we will make you whole." He could feel it trying to enter him. Like liquid night, sliding beneath his skin, his vision blurred. The world grew distant. His fingers loosened on the staff. "No!" the keeper screamed. "Fight it, Elias. Fight it." He couldn't. He felt himself slipping. Body, mind, soul dash into the hungry dark. And then a memory. Soft, small, faint. His mother reading to him by lantern light. Stories of heroes, of ordinary people, doing impossible things, because they refused to surrender. He gasped, shaking with tears. He didn't realize he'd been holding back. "I'm not yours," he hissed. "I'm not yours." With a final surge of will, Elias raised the staff with both hands and slammed it downward, right into the heart of the vortex. The world exploded in white light. A shockwave ripped through the clearing, sending dust and debris flying outward. In a perfect circle, the ink creature shrieked, a sound that fractured reality like shattering glass. Its form collapsed inward, imploding into a dense sphere of darkness that was sucked screaming into the well. The staff glowed brighter, brighter dash dash, too bright to bear. The vortex roared, time twisted, reality buckled, and in that moment, in the final heartbeat, before the ritual sealed, the keeper leaned close to Elias and whispered 4 words that hit him like a blade. "It chose you first." The vortex slammed shut. Silence fell. The winds died. The world held its breath. And Elias collapsed to his knees, the staff falling from his numb fingers, as the keeper crumpled beside him in the settling dust. Chapter 12. The Ending, or What Remains. Silence settled over the clearing, like a heavy blanket dropped from the sky. No wind, no whispers, no trembling ground, only stillness, the kind that feels wrong, because the world is holding its breath. Elias knelt in the dust, gasping for air, his chest burning as if he'd swallowed fire. His hands shook uncontrollably, his vision blurred at the edges, colors warping like heat rising from pavement. But he was alive, barely. The keeper lay beside him, her cloak torn, her skin pale as stone. Ink still seeped slowly from the wound in her shoulder, curling into the air like dying smoke. Elias crawled toward her. "Keeper," he whispered. He didn't know her real name. He wasn't even sure she remembered it herself. Her eyes fluttered open. Faint blue light still flickered inside them, as if her soul burned with the last embers of whatever power she carried. "You did it," she murmured. "Most do not." Elias looked toward the well. The surface was sealed again, smooth, dark, silent. No ink, no voices, no movement, but he could still feel it. A pressure in the air, a presence beneath the stone, asleep, but not dead. "Is it gone?" he asked. The keeper managed a weak, bitter smile. "No, things like that do not die." Her gaze drifted to the stuff lying on the ground beside him. "They only wait." Elias swallowed hard. His heart pounded in his ears. He felt the truth before he even asked. "And the book?" The keeper's expression darkened. That was not the book. She coughed, a thin ribbon of ink staining her lips. "That was only the piece it allowed you to see." Elias felt the world tilt slightly around him. "So the rest of it is still here," she finished. "And here." She tapped the ground beside her, and most importantly, she reached out with a trembling finger and touched his chest right over his heart. Here, Elias recoiled instinctively. I don't feel anything. You will, the keeper said softly. Not now. Not today, but soon. A shadow passed across her face. And when it calls, you will hear it. A chill crept through Elias's spine. I don't want this, he whispered. Neither did I, she said. Her voice was fading, each word thinner than the last. That is why the book left me, why it chose you instead. She stared at him with eyes full of centuries of pain. Because I fought it. And you listened. Elias opened his mouth to protest, but the keeper raised a hand. Do not lie to yourself, Elias. Her voice was cold, but not unkind. You wanted answers. You wanted truth. And the book feeds on desire. A long silence followed. The sky above them dimmed. The twilight that lit this strange world shifted into deeper shades, fading into near darkness. Elias stared at the well. So what happens now? The keeper exhaled slowly, her breath shallow and uneven. Now, you decide what you become. She gestured weakly toward the sealed well. You can leave this world. The archway will reopen for you alone. Elias's heart lifted for a brief moment. He could go home, back to his life, back to a world that made sense. But the keeper wasn't finished. Or, she whispered, you can stay and learn what it truly means. To hold the book's attention, Elias froze. Why would I ever stay here? The keeper's eyes softened. Because it will follow you back, she said. Into your world, into your dreams, into the lives of the people you love. He felt the truth of her words sink into his bones like ice water. And if I stay, you may slow it. A weak smile crossed her lips. You may even learn to cage it. For a time, the ground trembled faintly beneath them. The well pulsed once, a heartbeat, a reminder. The keeper's breath shuddered. Elias, whatever choice you make. Her voice cracked, fading almost to nothing. Make it soon. Her eyes closed. Her body slumped forward. The faint blue fire in her eyes went out. Elias stared at her in horror. He touched her shoulder gently. Keep her. But she didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't wake. A cold breeze swept across the clearing. The shadows deepened, and the stone archway behind him, the one that once broke the world, began to glow faintly with the soft blue hue of a door waiting to open. Elias looked from the wall to the staff to the archway. Two paths, two worlds, two futures. Behind him, the way home. Before him, the way deeper. He took a step, then another. And in the silence that followed, only one thing was certain. The book was not done with him. Not yet, not ever.